What are the physical characteristics that your body needs to properly meet the demands of the sport of basketball? Here at Basketball Movement Lab, our goal is to help you reduce your risk of injury, make you a more efficient mover on the court, therefore keeping you on the court, and therefore making you a more effective basketball player. If you want to follow along with us on this journey, please like this video and subscribe as well. Now, we know from last video what the demands are that the sport of basketball places on our body physically. But today we want to talk about what we need, what our traits and characteristics should be physically, so that we can safely and effectively handle those demands that the sport places on us, so that we can perform well without breaking down and be a step ahead physically instead of a step behind. As we go throughout these different physical characteristics, I'm not going to touch on each of them too much for the sake of time. We'll have to break them down further in future videos. But I did want to preface that we're going to talk mainly about an injury prevention standpoint with these physical characteristics, but also from a basketball performance standpoint. And the main reason is you can't really separate the two. A good example of this is, first we're going to talk about joint mobility. And by the way, these physical characteristics are going to be in no order of importance necessarily. But when we're talking about joint mobility, of course, having better mobility is going to help you prevent against injury, but it's also going to help you sink into deeper positions on the court as well, which can potentially help improve your performance. So just keep that in mind. We're going to talk about injury prevention and basketball performance. We're going to be combining the two. Like I said, starting with joint mobility, we're going to talk about our ankles, our hips, and our thoracic spine. Of course, we want good mobility everywhere in our body, but those are just three of the main ones we're going to talk about today. We've got a few different directions that our ankle can move, but mainly we're going to talk about ankle dorsiflexion today. Most of you have probably heard about ankle dorsiflexion. Super important for basketball players. Can help you prevent against knee pain, help you prevent against foot pain, plantar fasciitis. It's shown that you have better dorsiflexion, that you prevent against ACL injuries. What dorsiflexion is it's your ability to bring your toes towards your knee or your shin, but also your ability to take your shin towards your toes as well, taking your shin towards the ground. A lot of people will look at what is your shin angle? Do you have a more vertical shin angle, or are you getting more horizontal? The better dorsiflexion you have, research shows you're a faster sprinter and you can jump higher. And in the sport of basketball, of course, it's going to let you sink in deeper into defensive positions, offensive positions, all around. We need ankle dorsiflexion. One of the main reasons we need good mobility in each of our joints in the game of basketball is because if we move well through the joints that we are supposed to move well in, then we are less likely to make up for that or compensate in other joints. We just don't need to do that. And so you'll be less likely to break down. You'll be a more efficient mover overall, keeping you more likely to be on the court. If you don't move well through your hips, you're going to have to eat it up in your knees, your low back, something else is where the movement's going to have to happen. We're going to highlight hip extension. We're going to highlight hip internal rotation, though again, all of the ranges of motion for the hip are extremely important. In hip extension, important for sprinting, important for jumping. Whenever we are down low and our ability to jump up, this is hip extension. Our strength and the ability to accelerate in hip extension is important for both of those movements. So when we're sprinting and we are pushing off here, that is hip extension. We want to be able to rapidly do that in basketball. Hip internal rotation, super important for deceleration. So when we are sprinting, if we are dribbling or just playing defense, and we are going into a movement and then we want to change directions and go somewhere else, we have to be able to plant and move. That is hip internal rotation. Moving on to our mid back and our upper back, which is called our thoracic spine or T-spine. I believe this is the most undervalued collection of joints in our body in terms of basketball players. So it's really not talked about a whole lot in terms of basketball mobility, but having good thoracic spine mobility pretty much makes any movement simpler and easier for any sport, but especially for basketball. A lot of rotational movements involve your thoracic spine, but for shooters, I also think it's incredibly important. If you're getting ready for a shot here, and if you have a very restricted thoracic spine that cannot extend very well, you're requiring a lot out of your shoulders, your elbows, and probably your low back as well, because you've got to somehow get back into this position here. Now, if you've got good thoracic spine mobility, then you can upright your spine well and be able to use your shoulders as much as you need them to. Use your elbow as much as you need them to. Require less out of your low back. And so having good mobility in your thoracic spine equates to having a nice, easy, or at least equates to having the potential to have a nice, easy shot in the game of basketball. Next, we're gonna talk about tissue capacity and load tolerance. I'm gonna keep it pretty short with this because we could go on and on about this topic, and we will in future videos. And this may be the #1 thing for helping you stay on the court and reducing your risk for injury. Tendons connect a muscle in our body to a bone. The main ones that we hear about with basketball players getting injured with are your patellar tendon, your Achilles tendon, your quadriceps tendon, and your proximal hamstring tendon. Loading our tendons consistently and progressively is a great way to prepare yourself for the demands of basketball. If you fail to do this and you jump right into basketball, you are going to be at a higher likelihood for injury. So undertrained tendons have a higher likelihood for overuse injuries. When you're not ready for the demands of basketball, your tendons are one of the first things to respond negatively to it. They are elastic, they are springy. We need to be able to store and release energy with our tendons, with our jumps, with sprinting, with all the different movements that happen on a basketball court. Now, obviously, we need some degree of muscular strength as well for the game of basketball, but specifically today, what I'll talk about is the ability to have good eccentric strength, to be able to control load well. And so when we are jumping, when we are landing, any of these movements to where we are decelerating, our body needs to have good eccentric strength neuromuscularly in order to control that well. If you don't have good eccentric strength, don't have the ability to control those loads well, you're gonna sink deeper and deeper into those positions, which can set you a little bit more up for increase of injury, but more so it's just gonna decrease your performance because you can't quickly get in and out of positions very well due to a lack of eccentric strength. Now, endurance is a really tricky component to talk about in the game of basketball. It's a combination of your musculoskeletal system, your nervous system, your cardiovascular system, but really let's just highlight the repeatability of certain movements in the game of basketball. In the fourth quarter, are you shooting the same way you were in the first quarter? Are you able to produce the same moves off the dribble in the fourth quarter that you were able to in the first quarter after you've played 25 or 30 minutes? And you've ran probably a couple miles throughout that game? Are you still able to do the same things that you were able to do in the first quarter? That's where that endurance component comes into play, and obviously everybody knows we need it as a basketball player. Now, moving on to the conditioning demands of the sport, let's talk about your VO2 and your VO2 max. Your VO2 max basically is your ability to consume and use oxygen in a given time period, usually measured in 1 minute. And it tells you what your maximum aerobic capacity is. Now, these numbers may not mean anything to you, but the most elite players typically have VO2 maxes around 55 or 60. High school players are gonna be a little bit lower than that, probably likely between like 45 and 50, depending on the player and the position. Males are usually a little bit higher than females when it comes to VO2 max. One study of semi-professional basketball players found that players typically played between 65 and 75% of their VO2 max. Now, just because basketball isn't consistently played at 95 or 100% of your VO2 max does not mean that we don't want as high of a VO2 max as possible. The higher your max aerobic capacity is, the easier that normal gameplay is going to feel for you while you're playing. It's also well documented and well proven in the research that the higher your VO2 max is, the more likely you're going to engage in higher intensity activities while you're playing. So you're going to run harder after that ball. You're going to have the energy then to run back on defense and play harder. So the higher your VO2 max is, the more likely you are to do those things. Also, the higher your VO2 max is, the more likely your body is going to not get injured while you play. The last aspect we'll talk about is movement skill and motor control. So these are things like balance, coordination, your ability to keep stability under contact. Very important to the game of basketball, but are hard to categorize, define, or put into a bucket. It's a combination of your nervous system and your musculoskeletal system. We won't dive too much into this topic right now, but the one thing I will say is a lot of the things in this category come down to practice and repetition. So the more that you've practiced a skill, the better fine movement patterns, fine motor patterns you're gonna have in the skill. The better coordination, the better balance, the better stability you're gonna have during a skill, whether it be shooting, ball handling, something as simple as jumping and landing. Those who have practiced jumping and landing a lot are gonna have much better mechanics and are gonna be less likely to get injured versus those who do not practice jumping and landing a whole lot. Now, if you work to build the physical qualities that we talked about in today's video, you're gonna be in a great position to properly handle the demands of the sport of basketball, which we talked about in the last video. One drill I'm gonna give you that's gonna combine several of these things. This is gonna emphasize some eccentric strength, some reactive strength, tissue tolerance, building up your tendons capacities with your ankles, your knees, your hips. It's gonna work on the motor skill aspect, and we're gonna work on mobility as well. These are gonna be repeated scissor hops. You can do them from different ranges of motion. You can do these differently to emphasize ground contact time, jump height, but today we're gonna emphasize just tissue tolerance. You're gonna put a little bit more weight on your front leg than your back leg, and we're just gonna jump up and down here, keeping, again, I'm not going super fast, but I'm not going slow either. I'm not jumping up super high, but I am getting off the ground. You can also get a little bit lower to test the mobility a little bit more of ankles, knees, hips, and work on our eccentric strength and tissue tolerance, reactive strength, motor control in those deeper positions as well. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with us today at Basketball Movement Lab. Fix the foundation, elevate the game.